President Donald Trump has turned his attention to Oman as tensions over Iran and the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz continue to escalate. Trump has reportedly warned that the United States could bomb Oman if the Gulf nation gets in the way of Washington's objective of reopening the Strait of Hormuz. The threat places Oman in an extraordinary position. A relatively small country caught between the United States and Iran at a time when the global economy is closely watching one of the world's most important shipping routes. So why is Oman suddenly at the center of the confrontation? The answer lies in its geography, its relationship with Iran, and its role as a mediator between countries that have struggled to communicate directly. Oman sits on the southeastern edge of the Arabian Peninsula, directly across the Strait of Hormuz from Iran. The country has traditionally pursued a cautious foreign policy, maintaining relationships with both Washington and Tehran. That position has allowed Oman to play the role of intermediary during some of the region's most difficult diplomatic disputes. But the current crisis is putting that strategy under extraordinary pressure. At the center of the dispute is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman and the wider Arabian Sea. For the United States, keeping the strait open is a major strategic priority. For Iran, control over shipping through the waterway has become an important bargaining tool in its confrontation with Washington. And for Oman, the problem is that it sits directly on the route. Iran and Oman have reportedly been working on a joint arrangement aimed at managing shipping through the strait. Tehran says the discussions are intended to develop mechanisms that would allow safer navigation while respecting the sovereignty and security interests of the countries bordering the waterway. But Washington is not satisfied. Trump has demanded the reopening of the waterway, while Iran appears to be using the shipping crisis as leverage in negotiations with the United States. That has created a difficult situation for Oman. The country has historically maintained close diplomatic relationships with Iran, while also allowing the United States to use some of its military facilities. Unlike several other Gulf countries, Oman has attempted to avoid becoming a direct participant in the confrontation.
We control it with a blockade, and I like the idea of declaring it a territory. I don't think they behave very well, but we'd handle them very easily, just like we do other things.
That neutrality is now becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. The situation is particularly sensitive because broader U.S.-Iran negotiations have stalled. A 60-day period that was intended to provide an opportunity for Washington and Tehran to move towards a wider agreement has expired without a clear breakthrough. Instead of moving closer together, the two sides appear to remain deeply divided over the terms of any potential settlement. That leaves the Strait of Hormuz as one of the few areas where negotiations are still actively taking place. And Oman is right in the middle of those discussions. Reports indicate that the emerging Iran-Oman arrangement could involve ships entering the Persian Gulf through an Iranian-controlled route and leaving through an Omani-controlled route. There have also been reports that fees could form part of the proposed mechanism. But there is a major complication. Any agreement could depend on Washington changing aspects of its restrictions against Iranian ports. That is where the dispute becomes much larger than a disagreement between Iran and Oman. The United States wants unrestricted shipping through the strait. Iran wants its security concerns and sovereignty recognized. Oman wants to prevent the situation from escalating into a direct confrontation on its doorstep. And international energy markets are watching closely because the Strait of Oman is crucial to the movement of oil, natural gas, and other commodities. Even a partial disruption can have consequences far beyond the Middle East. Higher transportation costs, increased insurance premiums, and uncertainty over energy supplies can affect countries thousands of kilometers away. That includes countries such as Nigeria, which remains heavily dependent on oil revenues and is deeply connected to global energy markets. A prolonged disruption in the Gulf could therefore affect oil prices, shipping costs, and the broader economic environment in countries that have no direct role in the conflict. For Oman, however, the immediate concern is security. The country has so far avoided being drawn into the kind of direct attacks that have affected some other Gulf states. Omani ports have reportedly come under drone attacks, although responsibility has not been clearly established. No missiles have reportedly struck Omani territory in the way they have struck other locations in the region. That relative security could change if Oman becomes openly identified with either Washington or Tehran. This is why Trump's threat is particularly significant. If Oman is perceived as obstructing U.S. objectives, Washington could increase pressure on Muscat. But if Oman abandons its engagement with Iran, Tehran would view that as a hostile move. The country is therefore attempting to navigate between two powerful and heavily armed adversaries. Oman's traditional approach has been dialogue rather than confrontation. That approach helped the country establish itself as a quiet mediator in regional disputes. But mediation becomes much harder when one side threatens military action against the mediator. The critical question is whether Trump's threat will force Oman to change its position or whether it will push Muscat even closer to its traditional strategy of quiet diplomacy. There is also the question of whether Iran genuinely wants a quick resolution. Tehran appears to have recognized the strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz and its ability to influence international shipping. That gives Iran leverage at a time when negotiations with Washington have become increasingly difficult. The longer the uncertainty continues, the greater the pressure on the United States to find a way forward. For Trump, that creates a political and economic problem. He has previously promised decisive action and a stronger position against Iran. But a prolonged confrontation around the Strait of Hormuz could create consequences for global energy markets and the wider economy. That makes Oman far more important than its size might suggest. The country is not one of the region's largest military powers. It does not have the economic weight of some of its Gulf neighbors. But its location gives it enormous strategic importance. It sits next to one of the world's most sensitive maritime choke points and maintains diplomatic relationships with both sides of the US-Iran confrontation. That is why a dispute involving Oman could quickly become an international crisis. The coming days could therefore be critical. If Iran and Oman finalize their proposed shipping arrangements, Washington will have to decide whether to accept it, pressure Oman to change it, or take a much harder approach. If that agreement collapses, the Strait of Hormuz could remain under severe pressure, keeping global markets on edge. And if tensions escalate further, Oman could find itself facing a crisis it has spent decades trying to avoid. For countries watching from outside the region, including Nigeria, the stakes are not limited to diplomacy. Any serious disruption to oil shipping through the strait could reverberate through global energy prices, trade, and inflation. That means what happens between Trump, Iran, and Oman could eventually be felt far beyond the Gulf. The Strait of Oman may be narrow, but the consequences of a confrontation there could be global. For more updates, stay with us on News Express. I am Cassie Tony.